Monday. Let's get through. Let's do some content. Sound good? All right. Rachel started us recording. That's great. Welcome, folks, to our SHAPE Virtual Professional Development Workshop. Today, we are focused on bringing our CSU job skills to your resume and your future career. You know, we've done a number of like SHAPE assessments for what folks want and are hoping for from these workshops. And this is a topic that is consistently asked for, right? So it's like, how, yeah, this is great, but like, I'm not going to do specifically this. So how do I take that and transfer that to this? And that's what we're going to talk about today. The importance to recognize what skills that are essential to you. It's funny because when I first created some of this content back for a conference a number of months ago, we did not utilize the word essential so much, and we were talking about essential skills. So we think about essential workers, but so that's just something that I was thinking about as I was prepping some of this, re-prepping this material for the workshop. I was like, huh, essential skills, essential workers, and so much of this is necessary, right? So we're going to talk about what skills have you built and developed around your positions that you have that can bring you to the next pieces. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is the first one where I didn't have the Zoom welcome overview because y'all are y'all are skilled professionals nowadays. So today we're going to focus on evaluating our essential skills gained in your current positions or roles, engaging in resume writing, and positioning your current experience as valid and compelling information, along with practicing and applying your learning in an interview setting. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to like put you on the spot. I would highly encourage some of that practice, but we are going to talk about the do's and don'ts in an interview setting, and then provide some opportunities in the future if you are on the job hunt in the coming months or years, etc. So, disclaimers, this workshop is experiential. Get ready to participate. So we have a Google worksheet for you that we want you to go into and really practice some of this stuff. This stuff does no good to you if you're just like, cool, I'm gonna sit in front of this screen for an hour and do nothing with it, right? We really intentionally create it so that you'll be able to utilize it. Framing is everything. So we're gonna talk about kind of how we frame things. Also, when we talk about professionalism, I want to be mindful of how we use that word, right? Because you'll notice how I come from a different lens, and even some of the clips come from a different lens, and some of them will like laugh at and things, but there are real recognitions and oppressive behaviors and assumptions that can come behind what we consider professionalism. And so we want to be able to talk openly about it, but it's also about how we frame it, right? We want folks to be as comfortable as possible. We want them to feel like fit is a tricky word too, because that's an easy way to like push people out. And we want folks to feel like there is some affinity, some connection to the bigger purpose, to the, ooh, I could be parts of myself here, and that feels really good. So, and then finally, that last disclaimer is we're moving from this concept of soft skills to essential skills. So, right, I think a number of us have heard and considered what this concept of soft skills are, right? And when we look at it, soft denotes a perspective of, well, non-essential, right? Like, it's like, well, that's great if you can, but like, that's just fluff. And it's actually the glue that makes things go together. I would say, like, if it's soft as anything, it's like that mud that congeals, that like allows things to happen, and then it can harden into like being a really solid foundation. But without good communication, without cultural competence, without teamwork and decision making, all of that stuff goes away. So those are our disclaimers for today. So here they are. The essential skills when we're talking about, so in doing my research for this presentation, I didn't necessarily go to, you know, academically based articles that have been peer reviewed, thoughtful. I went to LinkedIn, I went to Forbes, I went to CNBC, and really saw, like, it's great in theory, but when we put things in practice, how do we know the system to understand it so that we can change and shift it, right? So we can change and shift it to get into it, to ask evaluative questions and to critically make sense of it from within these things. So I went to Forbes, and these in order, I don't know if they're in order actually, that's a fallacy, so I need to track that, are the 10 skills that employers most want in 20-something employees, right? Very, very academically sound article. And here they are, right? They are ability to work in a team. We've had virtual workshops on the difference between collaboration, coordination, and cooperation. But we want to know that folks can connect and figure out how to decision make together. Ability to make decisions and solve problems. So that's right, taking and analyzing all of the information that you have, problem solving around what needs to be done, and the ability to potentially prioritize, plan, organize, prioritize work. See, I'm just setting myself up here. Ability to communicate verbally with people inside and outside an organization. When I see and hear this, I think a lot about the pivoting that we've had to do here, right? The recognition that we're in an online environment. We may be for a little while longer, especially when you get outside of your circles of trust, right? You might be able to gather with family soon, but that social distancing, we know that that's going to be here to stay for a little bit. And so more and more, you're going to be confronted and invited into spaces to virtually interview. And how do you communicate verbally and gain comfort within an environment such as this? And hopefully some of these real workshops and shape workshops have allowed you to become a little more familiar with what you might be able to expect. Ability to obtain and process information, the ability to analyze quantitative data, right? So this is thinking a lot about, you have to recognize that these ones came from Forbes. So there are a variety of careers and industry and organizations that you can be part of. And more often than not, regardless of, so say you want to get into contracting or landscaping, you're still going to have to track and manage your inventory, your materials, all of those things, right? Say you get into like sanitization for a city, you're gonna need to be able to look at a spreadsheet and to be able to kind of do the work and all of that. So a lot of these things you're like, oh, well, I'm not a business major, I'm not gonna look at quantitative data. I hate to break it to you, as a liberal arts major who went into education and communications, you gotta look at and analyze data a lot more than I ever thought we would do, right? Technical knowledge related to the job, right? So that's where we're going to start talking about how you can take what you have and position and frame it into the knowledge related to the job. So no, you might not be in the specific programs, but if you've had exposure to a POS system, which is a point of sales in retail management, the fact that you've had some might be that technical knowledge related to that job. Proficiency with computer software programs, it's just all around us. We legitimately, kind of across countries and continents across the world, have moved to having a small computer in our pockets, right? There are countries in Africa that totally surpassed landlines, don't have telephone poles at all, and jumped from not being communicative because it was wired to having a high amount of communicative capacity because of cell phones. So thinking about how computer software and programs aren't just around like the computers that you look in front of, but apps. I truly believe that knowing and understanding TikTok is going to be a huge benefit of our coming Gen Zers. That's why millennials wanted to jump on that, right? Like there's a lot kind of coming down the road, and it just keeps going faster. Ability to create and or edit written reports. So there is something, yes, I think that, you know, if you've done some other workshops with me, you know, we talk a lot about the systems that are in play that kind of influence how we think things should be done or are supposed to be done. And I can sit here and critique edited reports and written reports all I want. And currently, as it's formulated right now, my bosses still want that, right? So I can say, I don't want to give you a written report. Let me give you this awesome Prezi that shows and demonstrates the numbers and the trends and all of those things. And they're still going to be like, yeah, but we need it in a document. That's a little bit of worship of the written word. There's a great article that we could post about kind of how whiteness shows up in cultures, and I think that's one of them. And it's still a needed kind of recognized, demonstratable skill to be able to have. And ability to sell and influence others, right? And I think this is where the authenticity really wants to come into it. We're going to talk a little bit about interviewing and never presenting someone that's not yourself, right? And connecting in and figuring out what your genuine is and how and where you can connect, right? I've talked in other workshops about a friend of mine who's in a different industry who's really frustrated that it felt like everyone who was buddy-buddy with the boss got the things. She was able to assess and acknowledge that that wasn't authentic to her and she didn't want to fake that. But she, through her competence and through a one-on-one connection, was able to establish differently. So that ability to, I think this is around building relationships and working with and corroborating with folks. That in a Forbes article might show up as ability to sell and influence others, right? So that's the first list we're going to look at. The second list we're going to look at is the 10 most in-demand skills of 2019 according to LinkedIn, right? As we know, or may or may not know, LinkedIn is a program that is, I think, has been considered the professional Facebook. Whether that is true or accurate or operates as such, it's definitely a social media world where a lot of happenings occur. Whether it be posting about new trends, things. I know in a lot of classes, it's interesting when I know that students have had an assignment to build a LinkedIn profile in one of your courses because I start getting like connection requests from the students that I've worked with. And so colleges are kind of putting a lot of effort into recognizing the benefits of connecting and networking in this virtual world, which again, I think is going to be more prevalent now than we've seen before. So essential skills, right, as we talked about those are kind of those intangibles, but really necessary: time management, adaptability, collaboration, right, which we again remember is the ability to create something new with a team of more than one person with a shared vision that they've come to collaboratively, right? That ability to innovate and come to something new. Persuasion, so we saw that again, right, that ability to influence or sell to folks. And creativity. Now, I can have a lot of thoughts or feedback about like, how does this show up? And again, it's really about understanding what is being said is needed and frame it in a way that you can understand and kind of come to the table authentically, right? So what does time management look like for you? How have you demonstrated that? What is adaptability? We're all in a very adaptability necessary environment currently. And so I think that that's actually a good benefit for folks coming into the job world right now. Along with technical skills, there's portions of this too, right? So UX design is something that is apparently very necessary. I know very little about it, so I'm not going to speak much to it. People management, so kind of the technicalities of working with and organizing how people operate, whether that's like creating a schedule, understanding working structures, and having people kind of buy into that together. Analytical reasoning or decision making, we saw that on the last one as well. And then artificial intelligence and cloud computing. So again, especially for our college graduates or folks who are looking for internships, I think you're going to be seeing, right, cloud computing is really a familiarity with Google Drive and Teams and some of the things that you know, even the cloud on our iPhones, right? So operating and understanding that, oh yes, data can live in a cloud, there needs to be security around it, even having that conceptual knowledge of it, that's what cloud computing is, right? And I know that I've probably wildly oversimplified it for maybe some of our tech savvy folks there, but I needed to be like, I have no idea what this means, right? But I'm like, oh, no, I do. I definitely know what this means. I've operated in this for years now. So those are some of the two from Forbes and CNBC around LinkedIn, two lists of, you start to see some overlaps of those. So I want to apply it. I've talked at you for a little bit. Hopefully, does anyone want to come off mute or have questions or even little anecdotes about the two lists that we just saw? Any questions or anything, or like, I don't understand this one? Anyone know what UX design is that could help us out?
I was gonna ask the same thing.
No idea.
What, Jamie, do you?
No, I said I have no idea.
Great. Let's, here's what we're gonna do, because this is utilizing our skills. I'm going to minimize this. We're going to get into a Google and we're gonna say UX design, because when we don't know, we, oh, look, salary comes up, salary in Denver, jobs, UX design. Boot camp. So if you don't have effort or if you don't have familiarity in some of these, you can gain these through professional development, right? Learn to design intuitive digital experiences and build your portfolio. Courses designed to meet employer needs. Financing options and career available. What is user experience design? Oh, I do know this. So Nick was telling me about it, who works in CoLab. It's essentially the experience that a user has when they come onto an online platform, right? So when you come into a website or you immediately click onto an app, that user design, all of that is coordinated and orchestrated so that you have either a certain feeling or you're encouraged to click on something, all of that. So user experience is the process design teams use to create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to users. Look at us all learning up on something. I think something interesting about that, right, is like I wouldn't have put user experience with that acronym, right? UX design. And so those little things, those little no's, those little kind of tweaks, we call that in the communicative word jargon. And it's kind of like, if you know the language, that's an area of privilege, right? That's an area of access, of capital that can be utilized. And then if you feel like you're not in the know or you don't know something, that can feel really disconcerting and kind of like foundation shaking, right? And so, but how can you know everything, right? So I think like this was an interesting exercise for us of like, we don't know something, how do we utilize our resources of Google, look it up, and at least have a bit of knowledge around it, right? Okay, how do I get back to, well, we'll just go here. So I'm going to show this for a second because I'm going to go to something. So we are going to do a worksheet in Google. So hopefully, maybe you're on a computer, maybe you're on a phone. I think if you're on a phone, you can still kind of click to it. Also, Rachel is going to put the link into the chat. Thank you for the Google Drive. And ideally, what will come up is we're going to have that listed out. And then I want you all to choose a slide and go to the slide that will allow you to align your experience with these different things that are needed. Then on the right side, I want you to write a resume section with 3 essential skills, centering action words, and making them quantifiable. So what this looks like is, I'm going to give you a few minutes. This is the worksheet, the supplemental worksheet for the Shape ProDevo. So this is the demo, right? All of them have the skills and desired skills desired in the workforce from the Forbes and CNBC articles. And so we want you to look to your responsibilities and see if you can align them with some of these, right? So think about what positions you have. You can also put your name, your major. If you have an internship that you want to be thinking about instead, like this is all of your experiences, right? So once you've done that for about 3, 4, 5 minutes, again, this is just getting your brain going. Then I want you to come over here and it's your turn, right? So write out something that you legitimately right now could copy and paste into your resume, right? How does that look like? How do you write something out that you can put in and then be able to speak to? So again, kind of solid examples of this center on action words, making them quantifiable. Again, this is all a little bit of BS, but it's the ways that recruiters have been socialized to look at resumes and make very quick decisions. I think it's 6 to 8 seconds that your resume has to make an impact. So I want you to write out location, right? And then kind of think about what are 3 different essential skills. So I'm going to give you 6 to 7 minutes to do that. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and we'll come back together in a few minutes. If you are having issues or can't access the worksheet, let me know. Recording again. So once you have the worksheet and you have the list, can one or two of you come off mute and share? I haven't looked at any of them yet, but was it easier or more difficult than you expected to be able to connect things that you've done to what people are looking for? There's only 4 of you. I mean, 5 if Rachel did it too. So, I mean, it's a useful workshop. I did it myself. I mean, I made it.
Yeah, I think for me, it's easy to see how what I have done translates to those skills, but it's hard to combine the wording of like my responsibilities and those skills, because I know you're supposed to like incorporate like those buzzwords and things that are like on job descriptions into your resume. And for me, it's difficult to be like, I did this and I know how it utilizes these skills, but how do I tell them that by also being clear about what I did?
Yeah. I mean, you bring up such a great point, Carly, that it's not only knowing that you've done it, but being able to communicate that you have done it and you can do it again, right? Exactly. I see what you're looking for. Here's that. And you even brought up a point that we hadn't even talked about yet of when you are starting to search for jobs or internships, et cetera, really paying attention to the language that they're using and modeling that language in your materials, right? Because many of the processes now just scan resumes, and if you have these words, you're passed through to the next one, and if you don't, then you're cut. And it's like, how would we even know that? So I'm glad you bring that up, Carly. We'll talk about in the next process, right? If you get to that interview stage, that examples are one of the best things that you can have, right? And that takes some practice. That takes, I'm someone who feels like, oh, I could wing things. I can like do them off the cuff. And I have realized that in interviews, I'm not a great on the cuff or off the cuff storyteller, that I have to be thoughtful around, all right, they're probably going to ask around decision making. They're probably going to ask around teamwork. They're probably going to ask around weaknesses that I've overcome. So being able to have awareness of what some of the top asked questions are and having those examples are really helpful in practicing that. So great point, Carly. Anyone else? Any reflections from doing this?
Something I've done when I've done resume building is like I would look at the job description that I had already done, the job I'd already done. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then I would like try to come up with examples of like times when I used those specific skills.
Absolutely.
For another job.
Huh. That's a really good tool to be able to reflect back, right? And so to say, this is the job description that I was supposed to do. Did I do them? And when were the times that I did that? Because then it helps you story tell, right? It helps you around those examples that we know folks are looking for. That's a great, thank you, Adam. See, continuously learning every day. Awesome. Any others?
Are we gonna go over? Oh, sorry. Was somebody
No,
gonna
we
say
shouldn't
something?
go over
No, go ahead.
Are we gonna? I'm not gonna talk. Go.
Okay, sorry. I was just gonna share. So for me, it was hard to kind of connect what you do every day to like you said, just like the language, because the daily things that you do often, it's kind of subconscious, like your daily actions and your behavior that's just you. So it's hard to like put your character into words and like make people like you based on English and like a piece of paper.
Absolutely. How do we put what we do every day and some of the aspects of our personality into deliverable skills? That's such a great question. You know, I had a mentor from previous share with me this cliche that I hold true still about in these situations, you want to express, not impress. Right? So a lot of folks come into interviews or all of this with this expectation that they have to impress people and it's all about that. And truly, if you focus on expressing rather than impressing, how do you express that I'm aligned with the skills that you're needing? And this is why, right? I've read the job description. I've researched the company, the organization, the nonprofit. My vision is aligned with it. This is how. I really value teamwork. And this was demonstrated because of this, right? Jamie, you bring up a great point that some of that is just feels a little more inherent to our personality. So how do you put those into words? Well, hopefully this was a good exercise. I know it sounds like, Adam, you had a question about what we might cover today.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
You don't know the question anymore. Okay. All right, if it comes back to you, no worries. All right, so we're gonna keep going. Thanks for doing that. Hopefully it was helpful. I swear I'm going to get faster at sharing my screen. This one I want to make sure we have the sound on. Okay.
Oh, I know what I was gonna ask.
What's up?
When you have, you know, like I'm sure like Rachel and Emily, both of you are far enough along in your careers where like you can put a lot of stuff on your resume if you want. But like for like, you know, college grads, or like if you're applying to like another level of grad school or something like that, how do you prioritize what you should put on there? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if there's like multiple things that you've done that are relevant to exactly the job that you're looking.
I have thoughts. It kind of was to Rachel too. Do you have thoughts too?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I have things that like mentors and past supervisors have shared with me, and Emily, I'd love to hear if this kind of jives with maybe what you've heard. I've always been told that if you have multiple experiences that speak to the position in the same way, to go with the one that carries, like, that best highlights, one, what the job is asking for, and two, your level of responsibility. So as an example, I was an RA in college, and I was also a summer residence director in grad school. I don't put RA on my resume anymore, even though those responsibilities beautifully match a lot of things that I do. Like, still to this day, I do put the RD position because that included everything that I did as an RA at a higher level and with supervision included. So highlighting, you know, your experience beyond what's being asked for, and also tailoring it to exactly what the job is asking or wanting. Does that help?
Yeah. I think a rule that I've always heard is that you can absolutely leave things off your resume. You do not want to put things on your resume that you haven't done, right? So like, but lying is not omission when it comes to a resume. If you omit something, if you leave something off, that's just fine, right? I worked at a country club when I was in college, and that is not relevant to the positions that I was utilizing. But if I ever went back into the retail and dining serving industry, I would have a whole different resume. So it's not uncommon to have different resumes depending on different industries in which you're wanting to work. And I think that depth matters more than breadth in terms of how you are thinking about it. So for the positions that you're in, really considering how do you have 4 to 5 robust bullet points under them because you've done good work. I think so many folks just put things on and being like, I want them to see that I've done a lot. But if you don't demonstrate the quality of the work and kind of the robustness of it, even as a variety of different student coordinator positions, there is a lot there. So hopefully those are a couple things. Thanks, Rachel, for popping in.
Yeah, I'll share one last piece with those to speak to that robustness of bullet points, because I sometimes struggle with that. I'm a really good list maker, but my points are always really short. So I've always been told your bullet point should say what you did, it should say how you did it, and it should say why. And if you can incorporate a result into that why, that's a great sort of like easy little formula to make sure that you're communicating that depth that Emily is talking about.
Thanks, Rachel. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to shift from resume into interview now. So let's see. First, I wanted a little comical brevity, and we're gonna watch a clip on a compilation of bad interview clips from the media.
There's no jobs for manager, it's just for counter.
Good. I'm looking for the least possible amount of responsibility.
Mr. Huff, Mr. Jenner is ready for your interview.
Actually, we'll be interviewing as a team.
We're all in this together. And I wanted to put across the general idea rather than the details. Like, people get all hung up on details. Like, which school did I go to? How many O grades did I get? Could be like 6. Could be none. It's not important. What is important is that I am, yes?
Do you have any special skills?
Oh, yes. I do. I do voices.
What are your skills, girls?
Oh, we can dance. You mean like dancing? We're really good dancers.
Yes! We've come to this planet looking for intelligent life. Oops, we made a mistake.
We're happy to be in America. Don't ask for a green card.
I want you in the worst way.
Mr. Matsumoto. Moto. Martha, can I call you Martha?
No, you may not.
Okay. Human resources lady.
It's Pam.
I'm sorry. Well, Pan.
No, my name is Pam.
Are you saying Pan or Pam?
I'm saying Pam. Yeah, I'm sorry. Who's this gentleman sitting behind you?
Hello, Miss Lady. I have fast food experience.
Yeah, like 20 years.
So we're not gonna watch the whole clip, but anything behavioral wise, did we see maybe as problematic? Any like specific examples?
I think you can tell that a lot of them just like aren't prepared when they're asking like, what are your skills, and like the nervous, quick speech.
Yeah, the not prepared and like the skills misaligning with the job, right? So like, I think, right, to be doing voices, absolutely. If you're a comedian, Robin Williams, that is a skill. Probably not for the job he was applying for, right? And dancing, absolutely a skill. As you continue to see this clip, I think what's interesting is tracking identity is also important. And with the exception of the 2 women, all the rest of the clips throughout are white men. And I think that that's just interesting in terms of like our genre of comedy, of like who, because right, there are wanting to focus on behaviors and like getting someone's name wrong that you're interviewing with over and over again. That's something that kind of sticks, right? And names are really important. It's like how we show and desire respect, especially in what we just saw. There was an intercultural play there too. So having that awareness and recognition and prepping in a variety of ways is pretty important. So we're gonna watch another clip of more what to do. And I wanted to share it from the perspective of virtual interviews. So we're gonna watch that next.
Hey,
yes.
The sound is really staticky on those clips. I don't know if there's something going on.
Oh.
Just as a heads up, because your sound is coming through just fine, at least for me. Like, but the video sound is weird.
Interesting. I might try to play with the volume a little bit, and
Okay.
I might like turn it down on my end and see if you can turn it up and see if that helps. Will you give me like the thumbs up or down?
Yeah,
depending
totally.
on-
Without a doubt, video dominates. The digital space. The recruitment space is no different, and it's only natural.
Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna have everyone put themselves on mute, and I'm gonna put this clip into the chat bar so that you can watch it. Because if you did the worksheet, my hope is that you can watch this. It's just 3 minutes long, and we'll watch the whole thing here. So escape. Okay, let me know if you can copy and paste that. Great. All right, I'm going to welcome folks. Watch it on their own. Cool. All right, come back to me when you're ready. So there are things that I like about it. There's things that I don't like about it. I want to hear from you. What stood out or is something that you're thinking about after watching it?
You have to be so proper. Sit up straight, shoulders back, act like you're in a real interview. Like, I was like, oh dang.
Yeah, I think, you know, what I know is that this came from a company. So this is a tool that a company is putting out for folks who may utilize them to recruit or be recruited. What's important about that is that they're literally giving kind of a handbook of like, this is how we think you should do it. Whether or not you want to do it, those are choices that you get to make also, right? And so that did feel a little stuffy for me. And I'll be honest, after I watched it the first time, I was like, should I use this or not? And I think it's good to incorporate things that we can analyze too and ask questions about. So I'm like, oh, gesture, maybe I should gesture less when I'm doing these presentations, right? And so I'm even thinking about, but we want to think what's authentic to us too, right? What's engaging and captivating and where you want to go and what you want to do. So I even think in that, like some folks felt it looked more comfortable than others in it, and it's finding your authentic. So thanks, Adam, for coming in first about that, because it can feel like it's really proper. And what does proper mean? And there are a lot of cultural aspects about some of the things they said too. Did you kind of notice or tap into some of that? Anyone? Any responses to that?
I can go. So for me, I didn't grow up in the States, and like 10 years ago, my mom would come back with like white shirts and like black skirt or pants, and like I feel like the formal attire, like the recent years, has like changed a lot. It's no longer just like a suit and attire, like for ladies, like a white shirt and pants, like as long as it's professional and like proper and presenting yourself in a proper way. Like it's very different from like 10 years ago. That's how I feel.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I think absolutely the dress and the eye contact was two things that I was thinking of. I appreciated in the video how they didn't say, like, they didn't give dictates or mandates about, like, especially professional dress can be very gendered too, about like, you must be in a skirt if you identify as a woman, you must be, right? And so like being able to dress to impress and feel your best, right? And then if that comes across, there was another one that I watched that wasn't this one, but it was like, if you don't get the job, recognize that there was probably a variety of reasons and move on to the next one, right? If there is for any reason a mismatch in terms of if someone's not going to be valued for who they are, for what they bring, and for like the ways, then that's a real indication of who the organization is too, right? So I like that they didn't provide mandates. I question a little bit about the, what did they say? Eye contact is mandatory or something of that nature. And I think that's a tricky one. What you noticed was these are recruiters from all over the world, multiple different countries, and from one company, right? And so there are things that kind of trickle and influence and are kind of the default. And so arguably how we utilize and understand eye contact from a cultural perspective is really important as well. So always things to be critiqued, and also helpful to know what's out there in terms of framing and distraction, and focus on self does really help and matter to get your message across. So those are, hopefully it was a little bit helpful to know what's out there. So as we are thinking about kind of ending our time together, let's see, I'm going to reshare my screen. Great. So kind of compiled a little bit just in general in the skill of an interview, really wanting to recognize that essential skills, understanding it from a culturally competent lens. What do you value in a first impression, and do that? Because I think that that again is like how we can consider the jobs and the environments and the hopes that we have. Like we want folks to be able to be their whole selves where they are. And we understand that there's a variety of reasons why that may be possible and that may not be possible. And ideally, as you are interviewing, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And so how we think about what makes a good first impression on us, if we do that, then there might be a match. Read the posting and job description. We've talked a little bit about that. I loved Carly's point about mirroring language, if that makes sense, and if you have that experience and background, to be able to use the language that they have. Come with 2 to 3 questions. Consider what you want them to be. So that means that, you know, pretty typically, I would say, at the end of an interview time, there will be a, do you have any questions for me? And it does make a difference if your questions are informed, not necessarily about the nitty-gritty details about the intricacies of the job, but in general terms, or will you share with me about the timeline or things of that nature? It shows that you're prepared and that you want to have investment in learning about that company or organization as well. Always be prepared is my least favorite question, but always comes up. It is kind of a trend around the tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the position. If it doesn't come at the beginning, know that that is something to weave in through your examples and the energy that you have throughout answering the questions. So you can put little tidbits and nuggets, not about the intricacies of your you know, dating profile, but the how and who you are in terms of values and what you'll bring, and how that aligns with the position. We talked about it. I won't harp on it. Examples are clutch to have them. And then follow up. However you want to, whether that's an email, whether that's a handwritten, whether it's because it's been a week or two and you haven't heard anything, or maybe even longer. Right now, there's a lot of things going on, but to take the time and effort to display gratitude, however it makes sense, to the folks who provided time, does make a difference. How that is done should not be dictated or mandated, right? However that feels to you. I just got this email today as I was going back and forth from a student, and I thought it was really telling and appropriate for what we were talking about. So I assumed that this day and age where no news equals rejection, that I had just been rejected, and I've been focused on trying to maybe apply for other places. So this person just told me this today and then was like, actually, I was climbing the ranks and didn't even realize it. They didn't end up hiring for the position in general, but I made an assumption there. I think that's good around the following up. It's okay to absolutely provide enough time, and to have people you can ask around, like, well, it's been a week or two, to say, yeah, like, absolutely, you know, follow up, and to be able to ask about that timeline so that you can go back to those expectations and say, hi, you know, whatever that looks like. We, of course, don't have time, and this is kind of a funky place for mock interviews, and it is so helpful, right? At the end of that video, it said practice, practice, practice. So use me, use the Career Center, use the resources that you have at your disposals during this time. We want to be able to help you. So I am more than willing to set up a time to do a Zoom or a Teams mock interview. We can do it, like, these are the places to kind of be able to practice those skills. So really consider utilizing that and reaching out and doing that. So those are some takeaways and moving forward, and that's what I have for you. So we've talked about resumes. We gave you a worksheet along with the 10 to 20 skills that folks are looking for. We talked about interviewing and how to recognize that there are cultural aspects of professionalism, but finding what is true and right for you really matters. And looking at that job description at the beginning and all the way through the end, having that be kind of a guidepost. So Rachel will put the attendance link in. I'll stick around. Any last thoughts or questions, come off mute, let us know, and we're really grateful that you were here with us today. Thanks so much.
Hey, Emily, so I was wondering if it was possible to send us the slides that you made for today, just so we have pointers about, like, the skills.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, make sure you fill out that attendance link, and I'm going to email your supervisors right after this, and I will just use who was here to send those links right now. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, take care, all y'all.
Bye.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, you probably all both know, no workshop on Thursday because it's the SLA Awards. Woo! Cool.
Okay, so I was just like, how much, like, and like, making it specific to a position should I do in my resume? Because just, like, since I'm graduating, I feel like some of my peers have talked to me about how they've applied to, like, 80+ jobs, and I'm like, that's just a lot of time to, like, mimic the language in job postings for that many things. I feel like that's so much, it feels more genuine if I were doing that, if I were moving from one position that I already had to another. But since I'm just, like, starting my career, A, it feels like a lot of time and effort that I don't necessarily have, and B, it doesn't really, I don't know, it feels weird.
I have thoughts. Rachel, you probably have thoughts. Adam, you might have thoughts. We should just have the conversation, right? So I would say if you are applying for a number of similar positions, the resume is not as important as the cover letter, right? So the resume, if you have, like, 3 different types of positions, say a marketing person is going to do, like, marketing specializing in social media, marketing specializing in creating commercials and video production, and then marketing in terms of, like, copy editor. Having 3 potential resumes that that do model that, but that don't have to change a whole bunch, right? It's okay to have a pretty generic like objective, right? Seeking a position that allows for the continued skill development around this, whatever, doesn't matter. So those kind of 3, but then really having the, because usually it's cover letter and resume that are important. So focusing on the details of that cover letter. And I've gone so far within job postings that legitimately take the posting and write it specifically to it, to a point of like bullet pointing, this is how I meet this criteria, this is how I meet this criteria, because then it is not inconceivable, that's the wrong word, but it's, oh, I'm gonna stop the recording. Bye all. These tips are probably still helpful. I'm gonna stop now. Bye.